After more than a decade's worth of development, the Air Force has now placed its next-generation air dominance fighter on hold, pending a complete reevaluation of the program and, more importantly, its costs. With massive cost overruns compounding on big-ticket programs like the Sentinel ICBM, the pressing need to modernize the bomber fleet, continuing development on AI-enabled drones, ongoing efforts to field a new airborne tanker, and more, it's increasingly becoming clear that the Air Force just can't afford to fund all the programs that it arguably needs to in order to maintain air dominance in the decades ahead. With Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall now calling for a new air superiority fighter that rings in at or below the current unit price of the F-35, the harsh reality of the situation is that fielding the world's first 6th-generation fighter at that price point just isn't realistically possible. In fact, you'd be lucky to design a new 4th-generation jet like the F-15EX or Eurofighter Typhoon at that cost. But maybe Kendall's call for a new air superiority fighter at the F-35's price point suggests a different possibility. Maybe the most affordable answer to the air superiority question is actually the F-35 itself. So let's talk about the F-35, its forthcoming Block 4 upgrade, and just how well it could fill the air superiority role in the 21st century. I'm Alex Hollings, and this is Air Power. China recently unveiled their new J-35 stealth fighter, an aircraft that's meant to compete directly with America's F-35 on the export market. And I've been using Ground News to stay on top of how outlets are covering this story all around the world. Ground News is an aggregator that collects stories published by news outlets all over the globe and combines them all into a single easy-to-read feed, making it easier than ever to not just stay on top of things, but to see differences in the way different outlets cover the same story. In fact, right here on Ground News, I can see that 106 outlets have already covered the J-35's unveiling. And while headlines are pretty similar, regardless of left or right-leaning outlet, it's interesting to note that right-leaning outlets have given this story a lot more attention, with nearly twice as many right-leaning outlets covering this unveiling than left-leaning ones. And Ground News even makes it easy to trace the story back to its source, showing you right here on the right that the War Zone broke this story 11 days ago on November 8th. I try to stay on top of a wide range of topics, and that's why I love the Ground News For You tab. It lets me pick my interests from a long list of categories, and then it curates a news feed based on those interests. Ground News is an invaluable part of my research and my day-to-day news consumption, and between now and the end of the year, I can get you a crazy deal. I'm talking 50% off the same Vantage plan that I use every day. Just go to ground.news/sandbox with 2 X's or follow the link in the description below to get, again, 50% off the Vantage plan that I use. That's ground.news/sandbox with 2 X's to get 50% off their Vantage plan to help you stay on top of things. Since updating in the mid-2000s, the American way of war has been broken up into a planning framework of 6 operational stages: shaping, deterring, seizing the initiative, dominating, stabilizing, and enabling civil authority. Now, this all-encompassing approach to conflict planning and, just as importantly, mitigation, not only shapes the way the force employs its warfighting assets, but how it goes about procuring new ones, with each new piece of equipment, from an updated pistol in the hands of infantry soldiers to an advanced new aircraft carrier to high-flying new spy satellites, all meant to enable success in one or more of these phases. And in 2009, president of IRIS Independent Research and former Pentagon staffer Dr. Rebecca Grant penned one of my favorite pieces of doctrine analysis ever written for what's now called Air and Space Forces magazine, in which she redubbed these 6 notional phases of combat to the 6 phases of air power instead. Because, as Dr. Grant put it at the time, quote, Air dominance turns out to be important to all the phases, and critical in most of them. Not to make this conversation even nerdier than it needs to be, but air dominance in this context refers to the final of 4 potential air power states, as they're known within academic circles, ranging from what's somewhat informally called air denial, where your aircraft are doing little more than denying air dominance to your adversary, to air superiority, where you're able to act in the air, on land, and at sea without prohibitive interference from your enemy, to air supremacy, where your adversary is utterly incapable of effectively interfering with your combat operations at all, and finally, air dominance, wherein your air power assets achieve a 100% success rate, and adversary aircraft are rendered effectively useless. Now, it's important to note that on this sliding scale of air power states, air superiority is only 1 step ahead of deeply contested, and it's 2 steps short of air dominance, meaning the United States' modern approach to war is not only reliant on being able to fight and win in the sky, it's literally predicated on the idea that America can dominate the airspace above any adversary at any time, anywhere in the world. And for decades now, America has consistently demonstrated its ability to do precisely that, starting with the U.S. Army Air Corps in World War II that, by the end of the conflict, was the largest air force ever assembled, at an end strength of nearly 80,000 aircraft, and continuing through the proxy conflicts of the Cold War, where American air power suffered setbacks and challenges over places like Vietnam, only to make changes to training, procedure, and equipment to regain the advantage. By 1991's Gulf War, America's air dominance was bolstered by new stealth technologies, with F-117 Nighthawks leading off the fight by engaging targets inside the most heavily defended airspace on the planet, and American and coalition fighters dominating the few Iraqi jets that didn't simply turn tail and run. And then, in 2005, America redefined the way air dominance could be achieved with the world's first 5th-generation fighter, the F-22 Raptor. This immensely powerful and wildly maneuverable aircraft was built with the aerobatic capability to fight and win the close-quarters dogfights of previous conflicts, but with the added inclusion of both stealth and a high degree of sensor fusion, allowing the fighter to spot, identify, target, and engage adversary aircraft long before they ever even knew it was there. In a real way, America fielding the F-22 Raptor was like bringing a sniper rifle to a knife fight, relegating the super maneuverability found in modern Soviet and Russian fighters to little more than airshow fodder. But while the F-22's development began under the massive defense expenditures of the Cold War, its entry into service came during a unique time in American history, wherein the nation had no real competitors on the world stage and had no serious adversaries with fighters to contend with. And with America's focus on asymmetric conflicts against adversaries with no air defenses, let alone aircraft, the decision was made to cancel Raptor production early, after only 186 of an initial order of 750 aircraft had been delivered. But America's love affair with air dominance didn't end with Raptor production, and 10 years after the F-22 entered service, its younger sister, the F-35 Lightning II, joined the ranks of American tactical aircraft. This new jet was indeed a fighter, which is defined by the Air Force as an aircraft designed to intercept and destroy other aircraft or missiles. But unlike the air superiority-focused Raptor, it placed a much larger emphasis on the air-to-ground, or attack mission set. This gave America an unmatched 1-2 punch for taking and controlling contested airspace, with F-22s focused on downing adversary aircraft and F-35s tasked with wiping out air defenses until air superiority transitions into air supremacy, allowing the U.S. to bring the full brunt of its air power to bear in the form of 4th-generation fighters, bombers, drones, and more, all to secure absolute air dominance. Now, it's important to understand that stealth doesn't mean invulnerable any more than it means invisible, and no American military planners expected to be able to accomplish these goals without suffering any losses. In fact, Colonel Alton Whitley, a fighter pilot who oversaw the F-117 program at Lockheed Skunk Works, estimated Nighthawk losses in Iraq would be around 5 to 10%, a figure that would be considered wildly successful if not for the fact that no Nighthawks were lost at all. When devising plans for a new stealth bomber, the same Skunk Works commissioned an independent study to assess how survivable such a bomber might be against targets inside Moscow. That report concluded that roughly 20% of stealth bombers would be lost in such a mission, which might not sound all that great, but as compared to the Air Force's estimate that 60% of B-1 Lancers would be lost attempting the same mission, the real and pragmatic value of stealth in combat becomes a bit clearer. Because warfare means losses are inevitable, the idea behind stealth is just to keep friendly losses as low as possible, while maximizing the losses of your adversary. And until March 9th of 2017, this concept of operations really faced little in the way of real challenges. But that day, China's Chengdu J-20 Mighty Dragon entered service as the world's first operational stealth aircraft designed outside of the United States. America's monopoly on low observable aviation that stretched all the way back to 1983 was officially over. And while the J-20 wasn't as advanced or as capable as America's stealth fighters, it marked the beginning of a new era. One where America's air dominance could no longer be as safely assured. Shortly thereafter, Russia joined the club with its anemic fleet of Su-57s, and today there's a never-ending list of new stealth fighters, stealth bombers, and stealth drones in development for nations all around the world. And while today America's F-22 remains the reigning king of the skies, and will likely keep that title for more than a decade to come thanks to a long list of updates and upgrades that are already underway, the Air Force is painfully aware of the fact that there just isn't enough of them for air dominance against a near peer to be assured. Again, in such a fight, losses would be inevitable, no matter how good the aircraft may be, and with production on the Raptor line shuttered more than a decade ago, there'd be no way to replace F-22s lost in combat. And it was with this in mind that then-serving Department of Defense Acquisition Chief Frank Kendall commissioned a study into what the next most dominant air warfare technologies would be, all the way back in 2015. That effort soon matured into a classified billion-dollar X-plane program known as Next Generation Air Dominance, or NGAD, and it was good enough to secure buy-in from both the Air Force and the Navy. And by the beginning of 2024, the Air Force announced its plans to award a production contract to either Lockheed Martin or Boeing to build this dominant new fighter. But today, the same man who spearheaded the effort to produce this new fighter, now serving as Air Force Secretary, Frank Kendall, no longer sees the program as economically viable as it stands. With the Air Force budget straining under the weight of other modernization efforts, Kendall recently claimed the branch is looking to pare down the NGAD fighters' projected cost per unit by potentially as much as 2/3, with previous estimates citing roughly $300 million per new fighter, and Kendall now calling for a price tag that comes in under today's F-35s at between $80 and $100 million per jet. And even while acknowledging that Kendall may be privy to technological developments the rest of us are not, objectively speaking, that just does not seem possible. Now, of course, the F-35 is not widely recognized as an inexpensive aircraft, but in terms of per unit price, it's a downright bargain. Today, nations can buy F-35s on the export market for less than they can buy most advanced fourth-generation jets, like the F-15EX, the Eurofighter Typhoon, or the Dassault Rafale. And it's roughly the same as more budget-minded fighters like the Gripen E. Now, this is really only possible, of course, because of production volume. Lockheed Martin pumps out roughly 150 F-35s per year, with more than 1,000 already delivered, as compared to Boeing's F-15EX production numbers at between 24 and 48 per year, the Eurofighter Typhoon at an average of around 20 per year, and the Gripen E at roughly 24 per year. Now, the F-35's price tag being such a good deal wasn't always the case. An initial procurement of the F-35 came to the tune of roughly $221 million per aircraft during low-rate initial production back in 2007. That means the first batch of F-35s cost roughly $344.65 million apiece when adjusted for today's inflation. The F-22 Raptor, of course, comes with a similar story. The per-unit cost of the F-22 is famously high thanks to its abbreviated production run, reaching as much as $335 million per fighter by some calculations. But even if you take only the production cost in 1997 with zero research and development included, they still cost roughly $70.9 million per fighter at the time, or roughly $140 million each today. Again, that's $40 to $60 million more per jet than Kendall wants to spend on the 6th generation NGAD fighter. And to be clear, it's all but certain that NGAD will never see the production volume required to bring down its costs like the F-35 did. According to the Air Force, they intend to buy just 200 of these jets. At this price point, it would be practically impossible to field many or maybe even any new technologies in this new fighter, because new equipment is expensive to design, to develop, to test, to procure, and to put into service. In fact, just about the only way this new fighter could come in at or under Kendall's target price would be for this new fighter not to be a new fighter at all. Now, despite early reports of the F-35 struggling in air-to-air combat against 4th-generation jets that can really be largely attributed to journalistic malpractice, the F-35 has consistently proven its air combat prowess in large-scale air combat exercises against both American fighters and those hailing from a long list of allied nations. In fact, it's been reported that the F-35 regularly exceeds an astonishing 20-to-1 kill ratio against other fighters in the Air Force's massive red flag exercises, a figure eclipsed only by the F-22 Raptor. As Colonel Joshua Wood, the 388th Operations Group commander, recounted back in 2019, the F-35 is so good at air combat that he once watched a brand new pilot only, quote, 7 or 8 flights out of training take out 3 4th-generation fighters in short order in one of these air combat exercises. To put it simply, the F-35 may be an attack-focused fighter, but when it comes to taking out enemy jets at beyond visual range, there's a reasonable argument to be made that it's the best in the world, with the exception of its older sister, the F-22 Raptor. And in the next few years, even that ranking may change. Today's F-35 carries several systems that can be seen as upgraded iterations of systems first brought to bear by the F-22 Raptor. Its AN/APG-81 active electronically scanned array radar, widely seen as the most powerful and robust in the world, is the direct successor of the F-22's AN/APG-77, which was the most powerful radar ever affixed to a fighter when it entered service 10 years earlier. The F-35's Pratt & Whitney F135 turbofan is the most powerful engine ever bolted into a fighter's fuselage, and it too emerged as an iterative improvement over the groundbreaking F119 engines found in the F-22. But while the Raptor is, as I put it before, a sniper rifle that's capable of winning knife fights, the F-35's design skips the knife fight altogether and instead prioritizes long-range engagements. The jet's ability to collect and fuse sensor data collected by a wide array of sensors, both internal and external to the aircraft, provides its pilots with more battlefield awareness than has ever been possible in a fighter before, giving the F-35 that coveted first kill opportunity. In fact, whenever I ask fighter pilots what aircraft they'd want to fly in a fight against a nation like China, They always answer the aircraft they're currently flying first. I think they have to, but then after that, it's always the F-35. Everyone respects the Raptor, but the F-35 is not only more broadly capable, it's getting better every day, and it even stands a solid chance at beating the Raptor in a BVR engagement, or beyond visual range. And that's the F-35 as it stands today. And this aircraft is about to see massive changes to onboard systems and capabilities in the forthcoming Block 4 upgrade that may even give the Raptor a run for its air superiority money. As a part of Block 4, the F-35 will receive yet another massive radar upgrade in the form of the new AN/APG-85, which some official sources claim will offer nearly double the detection and targeting range and fidelity thanks to the use of gallium nitride. That system will be complemented by a new infrared distributed aperture system in conjunction with an upgraded electro-optical targeting system. And that is a mouthful of a way to say that it will allow F-35 pilots to target and engage enemy aircraft via their heat signature alone in any direction, feeding directly into the newest iterations of the AIM-9X, which Block 4 will allow to be carried internally and fed infrared target data by the aircraft's sensors prior to launch. Inside that weapons bay, new racks will allow the Block 4 F-35 to increase its payload of larger air-to-air missiles like the radar-guided AMRAAM from 4 to 6. And because the forthcoming extremely long-range AIM-260 Joint Advanced Tactical Missile is expected to come with similar external dimensions, it stands to reason that the Block 4 F-35 could feasibly carry 6 of them as well. And while the NGAD fighter has been designed from the onset to fly alongside a formation of AI-enabled drone wingmen called collaborative combat aircraft, the Air Force always intended for the Block 4 F-35 to do the same, thanks to a big boost in onboard computing power brought about by the ongoing Tech Refresh 3 and subsequent software improvements to come as a part of Block 4. In other words, the Block 4 F-35 will fly with drone wingmen. It'll have a more powerful onboard radar than any fighter in the world, a broader infrared search and track targeting capability than any fighter in the world. It'll offer better situational awareness than any fighter in the world, and will be able to carry the same number of radar-guided air-to-air missiles internally as the F-22. In fact, one might argue that the only hard requirement the Air Force has for its new NGAD fighter that the Block 4 F-35 couldn't meet is the need for greater range in order to operate effectively over the vast expanse of the Pacific. But an upgrade program meant for the F-22 could actually help offset that challenge as well. The Low Drag Tank and Pylon program is currently fielding stealth drop tanks to be carried by the F-22 Raptor, allowing it to fly with 8,000 pounds of additional fuel without compromising its stealth profile, at least to the same extent as current non-stealth tanks. And Lockheed Martin has already said that these tanks could make the transition to the F-35. Now, the F-35A carries 18,498 pounds of internal fuel and has a publicly disclosed combat radius of around 679 miles, which makes for a total range of about 1,358 miles with a combat load. Now, that shakes out to burning around 13.62 pounds of fuel for every mile covered, meaning an added 8,000 pounds of fuel provided by 2 stealth drop tanks could increase the F-35A's range by nearly 590 miles, or increase its combat radius to better than 970 miles. And while it would be an incredible challenge, maybe even impossible, to field a clean sheet new fighter capable of doing all of this for an out-the-door price tag of $100 million per jet, it might only be possible with the F-35. Now, I want to be clear that using the F-35 for the air superiority mission is not an optimal solution. In fact, the optimal solution would be to field the NGAD fighter as previously envisioned to provide yet another generational leap over adversary capabilities. But the US military rarely gets to trade in optimal solutions. Instead, the job is almost always to make mission with the resources and assets that you have available to you. In a perfect world, there'd be no need for air superiority fighters, and in a slightly less perfect world, the United States could afford to field a fleet of groundbreaking new jets bristling with the latest technology money can buy. But in our deeply imperfect world, full of budget overruns and political compromises, what matters most is being able to demonstrate America's capacity to win the next big fight so conclusively that such a fight never breaks out to begin with. And in such a world, the F-35 may not be the air superiority fighter we deserve, but it might just be the one that we need. At least, unless there are some big changes to the budget coming down the pipeline. And with that ends yet another edition of Air Power from Sandboxx News. I'm Alex Hollings. Make sure to swing by sandboxnews.com today and every day for all the latest in news, entertainment, and motivation from all around the force. If you got anything out of today's video, make sure to click like and subscribe down below, and leave me a comment so I know what I should cover next. And of course, don't forget to tap on that bell icon so you never miss a drop from Sandboxx News.